We are now recording. All right, welcome everybody. Happy Saturday. Today is Slow Art Day 2022. We made it. We made it through 2020. We made it through 2021. Just before I do a little casual introduction, I wanted to do a land acknowledgement. Before I begin any kind of presentation, I think it will be very important to acknowledge the traditional lands that we are on. This is in the context, of course, McMaster Museum of Art. McMaster Museum of Art is located on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. And this territory is protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. This wampum that you see here has the symbolism of a dish to represent the territory, and the one spoon represents signifies the people and how are they to share the resources of the land and only take what they need. And so what is Slow Art Day? Slow Art Day is, of course, a global event. It was founded in 2010, and I'm here today. My name is Olga Kolotylo. I'm the information officer at McMaster Museum of Art. Welcome, Andrea. And this is, like I mentioned previously, it's my first time participating in Slow Art Day celebrations. And I'm very excited to spend this hour with you. Slow Art Day has been around since 2010. It was founded in 2010. And since then, more than 1,500 museums and galleries have participated. It has a simple mission, help more people discover for themselves the joy of looking at art and in turn loving art. The essential idea behind Slow Art Day is that anyone can appreciate art and have something very valuable to say about it, regardless of their level of knowledge about art or art history. And of course, due to the global COVID-19 pandemic, as I mentioned previously, we've been challenged in the last 2 years to rethink how can we celebrate Slow Art Day. And so now we're doing it on this virtual platform. We've all joined here on Zoom. And although this event has been running for 12 years, I am quite new to this, and I just wanted to ask you, or at least consider the question of when was the last time that you really paused and looked at a work of art for longer than 7 seconds? Because 7 seconds is the average time that a person looks at an artwork. And I know that we now are living in this fast-paced, technologically advanced age where we have images being fed into our brains, into our psyche at this rapid level. And so that's what Slow Art Day is about, really to slow down and challenge yourself, like really challenge yourself and test your own patience and try to engage in this like immersive level of attention. So we're going to try to do that today. We have about an hour. And before I start, I just wanted to kind of personally mention that I am myself an art history graduate, and so I've studied art for the last maybe 10 years or so, and I still struggle when I'm in a museum and a gallery because I feel this pressure to see everything, and I feel overwhelmed as if I'm like racing against the clock, especially if there's a few really, really good, really juicy exhibitions on. And so sometimes, yeah, I find myself in this, rapid, fast-paced, economy-based environment where I feel like I need to get it all done because, I have work the next day. I don't have enough time for leisure. And so today is that opportunity, right, to really slow down, give ourselves an hour out of our Saturday to look at a few works of art. I chose 3 artworks from our permanent collection at McMaster Museum of Art. And we're going to take a few minutes for each to really look at them. I'm going to give you some quiet time, a few minutes of quiet time, just quiet contemplation. And then I'm going to open up the floor, and you can either unmute yourself and speak and say how you feel about the work, what it is that you've observed, what do you think the work is trying to communicate to you, what does it represent, okay? So there's really a lot of freedom in the way you approach the work. I listed here a few suggestions of how is it that can we look at art a little more slowly. Just first, get comfortable. Pay attention to your senses, pay attention to your surroundings. Don't be afraid to open yourself up to the work. And this comes with, your level of comfort. Allow yourself to enter the artwork. Imagine it as a window, right, that you could just kind of reach into, or a doorway that you can walk through, and then you see yourself in this new space, because that's what art can do. It can transform your environment and your senses. Please try to trust your intuition. Sometimes we don't follow our intuition, right? Our rational mind is going at this fast pace. So try to trust yourself, and then share your findings. We don't all see the same thing. And it's definitely a learning experience once we start sharing and saying what sharing our observations, our discoveries, how we feel. And then just look again once you've kind of activated all your senses, and maybe you'll find something new. I also have a few questions here to consider once you're looking at the work. How do you feel? So once again, paying attention to your senses and your state of mind. And then, of course, what is it that you're looking at? Just describe it. What is it that you see? Does it remind you of anything? Are there personal connections that you can make? How does the artwork make you feel? Think about your feeling before your rational mind kicks in. Pay attention to your body's response, right? Like your gestures. How are you gesturing when you're speaking? Then what would you title this work? Get curious about how it was created. What time period was it made in? What are the mediums that were used to create this work? So these are just questions to consider. You can talk about anything else that comes to your mind. Just think out loud as you share your findings. Let me see if we have everything, if I've covered everything. I think I have. Before we begin, does anyone have any questions?
That was a really good introduction. I appreciate the prompts and the context.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, I think we're going to begin now. This is going to be the first artwork. This is a recent acquisition to the McMaster Museum of Art. And I will give you a few minutes of quiet contemplation, of just looking at the work. Anyone feels like sharing their discoveries, please do so now, or you could take a few more minutes just to admire it quietly and look deeply into it.
Olga, this is Dwayne. I just wanted to say, like at first, I think it was helpful with your prompts of what do you feel immediately and what do you feel after a little bit of time. And there's a lot of sense of like solidity and a lot of straight lines and right angles. But as you sit with it, there's such a fluidity and sense of movement. And I found myself, I think, trying to almost unsee some of the surface layer because there's so much of the softness underneath that you sort of allow to come through, whether it's by focusing on a specific area or even just kind of softening your gaze.
Yes, absolutely. You've touched upon so many different elements in this work. There's an incredible sense of movement. I agree with you. And there is softness in it as well. At first, it may seem so chaotic and you don't really know where your eye goes. But after a while, once you give yourself that, you allow yourself to be patient with it, you can enter it from multiple perspectives, right? And there is softness, there's fragility in the line work, there's a sense of control in it. Does anyone else want to share their discoveries?
First of all, this is William speaking. Thank you so much again, Olga, because I should share with you that I did my studies. I completed my graduate degree in art history as well. So I'm notoriously overthinker when it comes to art. And literally I can spend like, yeah, I can overthink it. Like I'm about to right now, so I'll stop right now. But nevertheless, what's really great about Slow Art Day is that, just looking at this without knowing the context, and doing some deep breaths while looking at this beautiful abstract work. I love how it reminds me of a map. When I open a map and I see the different lines and different trajectories, like as though someone is mapping their journeys or different ways of going about place. And I also love, though, that when I look at it again and I take more time, the different colors, and I'm actually starting to see what look like aerial form of buildings, which is super cool. So I love that, you can equally go at it from either angle. And I also love that, and I totally agree with both yours and Dwayne's point about the softness. Just the
Yes,
fact the light colors are absolute, like the turquoise and even the black is soothing as well. I mean, all of these colors are they're calming. It's not quote unquote as overwhelming as one might want to think it is, if that makes any sense.
absolutely, it does. I see that as well. One thing that you mentioned is this aerial perspective. And I definitely see that here as well. The artist is approaching this from up slightly above, I think. And so there's multiple perspectives, but there's this distance, and it really lets us appreciate it from multiple perspectives and levels. Thank you for sharing that, William.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, this is Andrea.
Hi.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said. At first, having the chaos and then seeing the motion and the fluidity of it. But now, the more I look at it, it's almost like a set of Russian dolls where I see the surface layer and I keep seeing like layers, the next layer and then the next layer and the next layer going down into even more detail underneath. Like there's like, or maybe the idea of transparencies on top of each other, and you can peel them away and see the lower level artwork too. So it's very interesting.
Thank you, Andrea. I love that. I love that Russian doll idea. There's definitely multiple levels. There's it goes really deep into the colors, right? There's like a deep care for the way the colors are on top of each other, and then the line work is also like multiplied and it's done so carefully. Yeah, I definitely see that as well. Thank you for sharing that.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear everything you just said because my connection seems unstable. But assuming you can hear me, I just wanted to mention that some of my impressions, you mentioned the distance. My first impression of this, it makes me feel like I'm standing in the middle of a busy city and just sort of observing. I do get that sense of distance and almost isolation, but also I'm feeling a juxtaposition between my own state of stillness and observing versus the movement and hustle and bustle. And it could take you places, right? But even just the way the lines, are sitting over top of these other more solid colors, I feel that it almost feels like very skeletal, and the colors are very muted, and I am getting like a sense of isolation almost.
Yes.
And just observing but being separate from. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for sharing that. And your words are very beautiful. I do sense a bit of that isolation, right? There are compartments, and if you really engage in like a deep focus, you can kind of isolate yourself. And there's a sense of isolation because things are compartmentalized, right? And when we think about the hustle and bustle of the city, right? As big cities are so populated, a lot of people are very isolated and alienated. And there's like that sense of liminality. You're in between. You're kind of like on the threshold often. I think cities are also designed that way. And this may even look like an architectural drawing of a structure that either has existed or is still yet to be made, right? There's a little bit of that maybe. But thank you so much for sharing that. That was really beautiful.
Karine, just when you were speaking there, it just came to mind. I had this thought as well too when you were talking about feeling separate from it and kind of watching. It was making me think of like the old Hitchcock movie Rear Window, where you're kind of just watching from afar. And there's even elements like down towards the bottom left with the yellow. And we sort of associate that with, it's almost like the illumination inside. It feels a bit kind of intimate and voyeuristic, almost like you're seeing all of these buildings, but because you can see through them, that there's a little bit of looking into somebody else's world.
Interesting. Yeah, it's also blurry though. So what are we even really seeing, right? It's all sort of very dreamlike and elusive, but yeah, interesting. Thanks for all the comments.
Thank you. I love the engagement. Keep it coming. I'd have to agree with you about the voyeurism as well. Yeah, windows, right? In the city, especially when we see these large buildings, there's like a lot of windows, a lot of different worlds that we can look into. I can sense that in this work as well. Does anyone have anything else they would like to share? Okay. I'm going to move on and just let you know that this work is, as I mentioned before, it is a recent acquisition, very exciting acquisition. It's by Denise Tomasos, and it's entitled Life. It's from 2009, and Life is an acrylic painting. Denise Tomasos, the artist, was a Trinidadian Canadian artist, born in Port of Spain, Trinidad, emigrated with her family to Toronto at the age of 6, and studied at the University of Toronto and at Yale School of Art. For Tomasos, travel has always been a major element in both her life and work. It has influenced her interest in color, as you see here, line, space, from the homes and harbors that she discovered on her adventures to Africa, to China, to India, and to South America. Her extensive travel also informed her understanding of the histories and legacies of oppression, which led the artist to examine the ways in which we organize ourselves in physical and social space. And just to kind of touch upon some of the things that were mentioned, social space and physical space and even psychological space are all kind of communicated in this painting. The artist's large-scale works are semi-abstract. They enact a delicate balance between representation and abstraction as they are imbued with energy, vibrancy, and force. Tomasos' paintings integrate images from a range of diverse sources, including Caribbean textiles, historic slave ships, industrial shipyards, graveyards, villages, and maximum security prisons, evidently inspired by travel, slavery, and its psychological impact on people of color and the prison industrial complex. Now, I just wanted to briefly mention the prison industrial complex. I definitely, once the context is there for you, I definitely see that translated in this work. A lot of the lines remind me of prison cells, right? So there's that element of alienation and seclusion and almost confinement, right? There's confinement in the work, there's that tension. The prison industrial complex is a term. It's used to describe the overlapping interests of government and industry that use surveillance, policing, and imprisonment as solutions to economic, social, and political problems. And of course, in the context of the United States, one key feature of the prison industrial complex is the racial disparity in incarceration rates. People of color are incarcerated at disproportionately higher rates than white people. There's a documentary on Netflix I've seen a few months ago, but as I was looking at this and doing some of the historical research behind it, I wanted to just mention it briefly. It's called 13th, and it's just an excellent documentary. Maybe you'll watch it. If you haven't seen it yet, maybe you can watch it this weekend. It's a really insightful look at the prison industrial complex, and 13th represents the 13th Amendment of the American Constitution. So maybe look into that if you haven't seen it yet. If you have, please share your thoughts about it. Maybe you see some of those tense elements in this work. But before we discuss this work a little further, I'll just mention a little bit more about Tomasos and her work. If we take into consideration her active interest in traveling, we can view her work from a particular lens of transience, right? The movement. The structures in her paintings seem to float. And I believe somebody mentioned that there's like a floating feeling in her work. The lines and brushstrokes are not rooted in anything solid. It looks like a floating world. Perhaps not even a real place, but a ghost or a phantom of a place. Thinking of water, of industrial ports and shipping containers, thinking of air travel, migration. We are always constantly moving, right? The hustle bustle of the city and the world itself. In the modern world, we're never really rooted in a place, right? As a traveler, Tommaso's, the artist, made it part of her job to be out of her element, being at a critical distance. And this was, of course, discussed a little earlier, how there's this critical distance, this, someone mentioned voyeurism, right? You're looking at it from afar. And I think that really resonates in her work. And of course, that aerial perspective, right? If we think of movement and travel through air and through water, and how migration is happening constantly through air and through water and through roads and through these shipping containers. And all that is kind of imbued in this work. Here is the artist, Denise. There's a beautiful portrait taken by her husband, and some of her works are in the background. You can see the scale of the work. And just before we move on and before I open up the floor for more discussion, I just wanted to read her artist statement from 2012. In 2012, this statement was actually made in a very short period of time before Tommaso's passed away. She died from a very unexpected death at the age of 47. And the statement is, it goes as this: I was struck by the premeditated, efficient, dispassionate records of human beings as cargo, and also by the deplorable conditions of the slave ships. So many Africans stacked and piled into the tiny airless holds. In my artworks, I used lines in deep space to recreate these claustrophobic conditions, leaving no room to breathe. To capture the feeling of confinement, I created three large, this is speaking of a specific word, 3 large-scale black and white paintings of the structures that were used to contain slaves, and left such catastrophic effects on the Black psyche, the slave ship, the prison, the burial site. These became archetypal for me. I began to reconstruct and recycle their forms in all of my works. So now if you wanted to make some comments or just think out loud, please feel free to do so.
Olga, it's interesting as you were talking about that in the artist statement, because I'm always so interested in the process and some of the thoughts and issues that are important to an artist. But I'm also fascinated by this photo that you put up there and what's taped around the walls, right? Like what she's using for some inspiration and exposure. And there's dragonflies and birds and all sorts of interesting pieces that even with the works that are on the wall there wouldn't be intuitive, wouldn't be the pieces that I would be associating or connecting in. So yeah, just really trying to absorb that and see, because I've seen pictures before of Picasso's working environment in studios, or some famous artists, and all of the pieces that they surrounded themselves with and what they took as inspiration.
Right. Yes, that's a very good eye on the photos that she has a reference. See the wings that I see there. I think they're either organic or maybe even mechanical. And then when I look at the paintings that are in the background, I can start to see the shape of these wings, right? And that's of course associated with movement and, interesting enough, with freedom, right? But we're talking about confinement, we're talking about prisons, we're talking about slavery. And so what the wings are really powerful here. Yeah, it's a good attention to detail. Thank you so much for sharing that.
And also, I don't know if that's a Bosch painting right above her head, but there's something, again, very structural in there, but you can see the intricacy. It's like kind of like a candy box of different pieces popping out of it. And that definitely translates into her work as well.
Yes, absolutely. I see that as well. It may be a Bosch. If it is, it could be the Tower of Babylon, but I may be wrong. I'm not too sure. But the Tower of Babylon, of course, like super multi-layered and very structured, as her paintings. Does anyone have any other findings or thoughts or feelings they would like to share?
Just one word: wow.
Yes, yeah. Right?
There's a lot there. And yeah, wow, I'm kind of speechless.
And that's totally cool. It's, yeah, this work does leave you speechless. You know, it takes a while to process. Yeah. It's really beautiful. It contains a lot. There's a lot to discuss. I'm just going to give you like a minute or two more just to process and to enjoy even these two paintings that you see behind the artist.
Is the piece that's being used for this similar in scale then, or the same?
Funny enough that you asked that. Actually, yesterday was the first time that I saw this piece in person. And out of the 3 artworks that I chose today, this is the only one that I've seen in person. And you know what? I think it's smaller. It's smaller than the 2 paintings that you see here behind Denise.
Do you know the
Slightly
dimensions?
smaller. The dimensions I have here, yes, just give me a moment. I'm really bad with dimensions.
No problem. I used to work as a picture framer, so I'm big
Oh,
on
you're good.
dimensions.
Yes.
Yeah, I've looked at so many art catalogs and just worked with measurements.
Okay, I'll give you the dimensions and you can definitely imagine in your mind's eye. It's 42 by 60 inches.
Thank you.
It's still a large scale work, but I for some reason thought it would be bigger, but that's just, you know, in my mind, it might be a different scale.
Well, then knowing now that like about the correction system and totally you can see that with the bars and the layers of, you think of it in a movie, a jail where there's the different, it's almost like there's a courtyard in the center with the different floors and all the bars and surrounding, and you can totally see that. And I think this art is so beautiful and it really draws you in. And then you think about this very heavy and difficult topic, and that causes some tension, I guess, in me a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think that's what it does so well. There is that element of tension, and how do we move through that tension? How do we sit with it even? Once we know about the historical context and what Tomasos is trying to really communicate and translate in her work. It's a heavy subject matter. But what Tomasos does so masterfully here is that she presents that to us. And then it's up to the viewer to really kind of consume the image and then sit with it with a sense of respect for the themes that are explored, right? Yeah, I definitely feel that, Andrea. It's tense. It's tense. Does anyone have anything else they would like to share? Do you think we're ready to move on to the next work?
If I just can add to all of this, it's really in line with a lot of what's been said, but just seeing all these little compartments and what almost look like stairwells, and thinking of that in a psychological and just psychosocial, and just how things in society tend to be swept away and swept aside and hidden. And so you mentioned shipping containers. I'm seeing that more now in the work, and talking about slavery. It reminds me of the animal agricultural practices that are in place still today. I just wanted to mention that. There's a lot there. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. Shipping containers and the confinement, the stairs, all these levels of movement, and how slavery it's ubiquitous, right? It's omnipresent. It's everywhere at all times. Yeah, it's definitely there. And I hope someone else can chime in and maybe share their feelings about this as well. We tend to sweep things under the rug a lot. And so this really, this really reveals a lot, this painting. I'm going to give everyone a few more minutes to just quietly sit with the work. And if anyone wants to speak, please do so.
I'd also like to say I really like that some of her inspirations that she had posted in her studio can be found in these works, and just knowing that and seeing, you know, some of these lines that could indicate stairwells, there's also a sense of upward movement and of hope. And as you say, you know, the symbolism of the wings and just, you know, coming back to nature and ourselves as a part of nature. Wow, it's just so profound. There's like a sense of alchemy to me in that. Yeah, amazing. I've never heard of this artist before, so I'm really excited to see this. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that today was your introduction to Denise Tomaso's work. It is incredible. You know, there's no words for the kind of feelings that it can bring out of you. And as you said, there's a lot to it. There's so much that could be you know, discussed and explained and felt through her work. That sense of hope, yes, you know, upward movement. You know, if we ever feel down on ourselves, or if we feel overwhelmed, you know, it's a matter of like bringing yourself back up. And yes, that upward movement, of course, can be reached through flight, whether it's real physical flight or psychological, you know, elevation, right? And you need hope for that. You need to be hopeful. You need to remain hopeful. And it's easy to lose our hope often in the world that we're living in. I'll talk a little bit more about that with the next work that I wanted to show you. But yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm really glad that this is, you're finally getting to know Denise Tomaso's practice. Just before we move on to the next work, I wanted to briefly mention that if you want to see her work in person, and I'm sure that this is going to be the most incredible exhibition, next October, there will be a show titled Just Beyond at the AGO in Toronto. And it will run until February 19, 2023. I'm very much looking forward to the show. Yeah, and then another thing that I wanted to mention, just a heads up, just a heads up, the McMichael, I believe it's in Kleinburg. Yes, the McMichael collection is in Kleinburg, and they recently in 2021, last year, did a show of Tomaso's work. If you visit their website, there is a link where you could download a book, a digital book of that's kind of created, that was created when the exhibition was shown at the McMichael. And it contains beautiful images of Tomaso's work, her early work, and all the work that was developed through her years of practice. And there's an interview, a very insightful interview between two of the curators who did the show. So I encourage you to visit the website. I think you have to register, and then you will get an email with a PDF version of the digital book. So check that out when you get a chance. And before we move on, if anyone has any questions, please let me know. If not, we're going to move on to the second artwork from our collection, which is quite different. Okay, I'm going to take that as a let's move on. This is the piece. I'm going to give you a few minutes to, just look at it, try to absorb it. Refer to the suggestions that we posted and some of the questions, and then whenever you feel ready, just speak up, think out loud. So space to just, think out loud. All right, I'm just going to open up the floor. Let me know what you think about this work, if it makes you feel anything, if you feel connected to it, maybe it reminds you of something.
What I absolutely love about this work is that the figure reminds me of standing within a pool of water. I absolutely appreciate, first of all, absolutely beautiful how the artist, the way the lines, like so many lines showing texture and the depth,
Yes.
not only of her cloak, the fact, I mean, it's absolutely compelling. The cloak, like the lines show, it's like as though her cloak is draping, and also underneath, I see what look like mini waves. So it's so definitely the first image that came to my mind was me standing, very contemplative, very apropos for today. Yeah, no, it absolutely just makes you want to just take some deep breaths and enjoy being in a pond, or even by a body of water. And just
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned water, William. You know what? When I selected this work, I didn't even think of water at all. I thought that the base was ornate, but I really didn't think of water at all. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's incredibly beautiful, and I think that opportunity to breathe after a very intense work such as Tommaso's, now we have a chance to just breathe for a moment. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. The line work is, yeah, it's so masterful. I mean, it blows my mind that there's these incredibly thin creases in the work, and how the folds of the cloak are so beautifully and elegantly done. Yeah, I see that as well.
Hi, it's Andrea. I had a similar feeling about the water and the waves on the base, and feeling this was a lot calming, especially coming from the previous work. So I appreciated this time to kind of just take some deep breaths and just be with the piece.
Yes, it's very calming, right? As there's that sense of serenity, and I'm really glad that you all have a chance to kind of breathe and process everything that we've seen so far and thought about and felt. It's fascinating that I didn't see the water. I didn't think of water at all. Maybe my mind was elsewhere. But I see, the waves, the strong, almost curly type waves. They're very intricate. And then, of course, the movement of the cloak, of the robe is very fluid and yeah, it's like liquefied almost.
Olga, I was just going to say, so I was also seeing, water down at the base, but a little bit differently. I was seeing it as a little bit kind of chaotic at the bottom, and the figure as being this very calm presence, but in some turmoil, or like it looks like there's a lot of it, like, I don't know, they're standing on a rock, but surrounded by a bit of the chaos down below. So to me, I see the replication of some of the flow in the garb and as well as in the water down below, but there's sort of a solidity and presence in, I don't know if it's the scale of some of the lines up above as opposed to a lot of the detail down below
Right.
in what I see in the water. And then the other thing I was just going to say is, again, my first time doing an experience like this virtually, but I kept noticing with this that I kept wanting to change my perspective. And I think that's what I do in person with sculpture, is I keep trying to move around and see it from different angles and perspectives, as opposed to a two-dimensional image that we just looked at before, that I felt like I could move my eyes around and see everything I needed to see. But in here, there's this sense that I'm missing, because I want to see it from behind. I want to see it from the side.
Right. Yes, I totally agree with you. With sculpture, I tend to approach it from multiple angles. I want to move around and see it. I apologize that I didn't include a photo of the back. We actually do have a photo of the back. And you know what? After this presentation is over, I do encourage you to visit our website. We have our collection digitally presented on the website, and there are photos of this work. I'm going to go ahead and just give you the name. This is a figure of Guan Yin. It's from the Qing Dynasty, 18th century China. And so if you type that into the e-museum catalog, you'll be able to see multiple photos. I think there's like maybe two more, a detailed photo, and I think a photo of the back of this sculpture. And so please do so. I'm so sorry that I didn't include a different perspective of this. But yes, this is a figure of Guan Yin. And you know what, when I chose this work, I think what I was gravitating towards was that sense of calmness and serenity. And also I was just so intrigued by the line work, right? Like the way the lines are just carved into the porcelain. And I found it so elegant. I found the work to be so elegant, and the way the face and the facial expression is held kind of slow downwards, but there's this sense of humility, and at the same time, there's this very strong presence in the figure and how it translates into the world, right? It's very regal, but at the same time, not in a boastful way, but almost in like a very humble way. And so when I started looking into the history of this figure and who is the Guan Yin, what is it, what does it represent? I found out that the Guan Yin is the Bodhisattva of Compassion. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, let's talk a little bit about compassion. I think we can all benefit from compassion in our world today and in our personal lives. The Guan Yin, the Bodhisattva of Compassion, in Buddhist philosophy, the Bodhisattva are beings who have attained enlightenment, but they have chosen to delay nirvana. So Bodhisattvas are not Buddhas. They have attained that level of enlightenment in the context of Buddhism, but they decided to stay on earth in this earthly realm in order to help others. And that's why they are known, that's why the Guan Yin is known for its compassion towards those who are suffering. And so the Guan Yin, it was originally a male bodhisattva in India, in Indian Buddhism. However, it came to be identified as a woman in Chinese and Japanese Buddhist belief. So it's interesting that when you look at this figure, you may actually not know. It's quite ambiguous in its, in its gender. You may not know if it's a woman or a man, because the garb can be worn by either, right? And so I found that to be super interesting, like that ambiguity. This figure, as it's been described by research, and of course you could argue if it does or not, but it actually has both masculine and feminine qualities. And so perhaps it is ambiguous, but you may see it otherwise. I do see the ambiguity, perhaps like in the way the figure is dressed. And of course, there's that beautiful ornament right where at the heart level, right at the chest. And so it's hard to tell, really. And I think part of that is that the Guan Yin, the Bodhisattva, can be it can be evoked, and it could be what's the word am I looking for? It can be manifested in anybody, right? Whether it's a male or female, it doesn't matter. And I found that super interesting about this, also being that it was created in the 18th century in Qing Dynasty. And just to tell you a little bit about Qing Dynasty, it was a period that was known as the last dynasty of Imperial China. And so later on, it was followed by the Republic of China, as we know it. Qing Dynasty was, let me just see my notes here so that I don't mess up. My apologies. It has witnessed the reign of 3 Manchu emperors, 2 of which were very interested in other cultures, particularly the West. During these 3 prosperous reigns, the arts, of course, flourished at court with very far-reaching implications for innovation. However, it was the final dynasty, and I do encourage you to do a little bit of your own research, because I may not be able to talk about it in full, and I just, I don't have the expertise on Chinese arts and culture, but I do believe that Qing Dynasty was very powerful, but it ended up dissolving because of a lot of different implications, a lot of different social issues. And so it was followed by the Republic of China. Now, during the reign of Qing, the majority of people followed Confucianism, and Confucianism was a state ideology, but there were still minority religions such as Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese folk religion, Taoism, Islam, shamanism, Christianity, and among many others. So this figure here, I'd say, represented a minority group who were believers of Buddhism. And there are, of course, many strains of Buddhism. Here, we're specifically talking about the Chinese. And yeah, I personally chose this work because, of course, I was at first very, very, I was gravitating towards that feeling of calm and that strong presence that was mentioned earlier by one of you. But then once I found out more about Guan Yin, I thought, okay, let's talk a little bit about compassion. We can all benefit from it. It is something that can help us become better people. It helps us grow. And we are living in such a strange time where the world is so polarized, that compassion for others it would be nice, right? It would be nice to be a little more compassionate to each other, and especially to ourselves. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to include this work today. But I feel like I've been talking for too long, and I really want to hear some of your thoughts and feelings on this work. So please feel free to speak.
I'll just say that the first word I thought of seeing this piece is serenity. So when you said it, I thought, yeah, nailed it.
Definitely, right? Yeah, it's very serene.
Yeah. And I'm so happy someone mentioned the water right away. Just the movement. I imagine this figure swaying in the wind and getting a sense of the. It's interesting because whoever said about the water at the bottom being more chaotic, I do see that now. And I pick that up at first either. But then the figure itself almost reminds of smooth, calming water, and that's really in line with Buddhist tradition and,
Absolutely.
calming and stilling the waters. And I'm actually wondering did you say the image at their chest, at Guan Yin's chest, is that a lotus?
Didn't mention that, but I do believe it is. I know that there's a few ways that the Guan Yin has been represented, and I think the lotus is one of those motifs, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
coming out of the muddy waters, right?
That's
Lotus
right.
rays
That's right.
repel all the water and muck. Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you
That's
so
perfect
much.
timing. You have no idea. When I saw this, like, wow. I was so happy you were hosting this today, and this was what brought me here, actually. Seeing
I'm
this
so
here.
glad.
Yeah, so
Oh,
perfect.
thank you. I'm really glad that you joined us today. I know that, folks, we are at 1 o'clock now, and we looked at 2 works. However, there is one more. My question to you is, if you want to continue, I'd be more than happy to discuss the third and final work and still hear your thoughts. Or we could end here, or if some of you would, if you want to leave at this point, that's totally cool with me. Just let me know. Let me know if you still want to continue, or if you are, if you're ready to move on with your weekend.
I'm curious to see what the third piece is that you selected. So I'm definitely interested in have the time. I just want to say one more piece on this, because I think a few of us are now saying it's a bit of a, calm in the storm, or an anchor in the storm with the solidity of this figure. But balancing with that, I just keep getting drawn back to what appears to be the tiniest feet proportionally, kind of balancing on perching on this rock for such a stoic, solid figure.
Right. Yeah, they're so tiny and so precious. You have great eye for detail. I know you noticed the photographs or the images above the paintings in Damascus Studios, and yeah, the feet could be easily missed as well, because of the ripple effect of the water, perhaps. But they're just so small and precious, and yeah, it's, I guess what I really like about that, once you get to know the Guan Yin and what it represents, is that feet in a way, I guess, represent humility as well. And since this is a bodhisattva, so it's not a Buddha, it's a bodhisattva. Guan Yin has attained that enlightenment, and yet Guan Yin is still earthly, right? Guan Yin is here present with us on earth. And so maybe the feet being in the water or on the rock or on the ground are kind of a part of that, right?
That would be reflecting the culture as well, right? Just Chinese culture and women's feet and feet finding.
Yes.
I didn't catch that at all. I laughed out loud when you mentioned the feet.
Right? They're so small.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm also happy to stay. I'm really enjoying this, actually, and I love the whole idea of like the slow art day. Like, I work from home at a computer all week, so this is really nice to have a just a change of pace.
Yeah,
So
I'm so glad.
I'll stay on. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for staying on. I'm more than happy to share the final one. This image of Guan Yin and Denise Damaso's paintings, I believe they were included in our social media marketing of this event. And so you are somewhat familiar if you've seen them before. The third image was not shared. And I'm really curious to see and to hear what you think about it, because when I chose that work, I didn't know who the artist was at first. Of course, I just looked at the image. That was my way of choosing the artworks today. I just looked at the image of the work, and then I delved deeper into the creator and the historical context. So I guess this would be an opportunity to move on to the next image. This is it. I'm going to give you a few minutes. I will not mention who the artist is or the title, or what, let's maybe even have a moment and like think about what could we title this work, and what does it remind you of, if anything? And then I will share with you the artist's name, the date, the time in which it was made. But here's a few minutes of just quiet contemplation. Right, folks. How does everyone feel about this? What do you think? What do you feel?
For me, it feels very earthy, like the browns and the green and the pigment color and the blue. And I feel like it's inspired by nature. Like I feel like the middle lakes and leaves and like some of the outlined looks like leaves to me. And the pigment reminds me of like rock paintings from indigenous culture. And yeah, I want to get lost in it. I feel like I want to like go for a walk in it or something.
That's lovely. Yes, I see that as well. It's very earthly.
I was also thinking, rather topographical as well too. There's a piece that kind of reminds you of an aerial view in there. There's also a piece of me, especially when you look at the rich, blues and black colors in the middle, that it reminds you of when colors are bleeding through, like you put tissue paper down on top of something, and it's almost like I can see those little tendrils moving or filling in, even though I know it's a static image. But then there's also something, and I don't know if it's with some of the way that some of the lines and quadrants are drawn out around it, and especially with a lot of the dotting around the pink areas, that reminds me of Australian Indigenous women's art. And there's you see a lot of those motifs and some of that as well too. So it seems structured in some ways, but also just kind of letting it bleed through from underneath at the same time.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, you touched upon so many great themes as well. There's a sense of control, and yet a lot of it is left up to chance with that bleeding through, that stainage type technique. And I really, really appreciate that, right? There's that outline, that sense of control, and then there's that opportunity just to leave it to chance. And I love that you mentioned this kind of like living organism of how it just the paint kind of seeps through. Yes, absolutely. I see that as well. Yeah, there's so many things that also remind me other artworks. I'll go on and mention actually the work that reminds me of in just a bit, but I still want to hear some of your discoveries or your thoughts and feelings of this work. Would you be able to guess the time period in which this was made?
It's interesting because my instinct is it seems so evocative of an older tradition, but it looks a bit more modern to me. Like if I had to guess, I would say somebody did this, and I don't know if it's because of the colors, but I would say somebody did this in the 50s or 60s, but stemming from an older tradition.
Yes, yes. The work is definitely abstract. The colors, I think they do connote a little more modernity, right? It's a little more modern in the color choice. And I'm just going to let you know that this work, as you said, you're very close. It was made in 1948. So it is a modern, it's more like an abstract expressionist work. And it is a mixed medium on paper. So the paper, you could definitely sense that, that seeping through the stainage of the paper. Perhaps it's watercolor. I actually don't know the exact medium that it was used in, but I'd love to discuss with you some, some options of what it could possibly be. Maybe ink, right? Watercolor, maybe even acrylic, but mixed with water. This was created by Alexandra Luke, 1948, and the title is Automatic. So now that you know this, do you have any other thoughts on it or feelings?
I was just going to say, not surprised at all that it's a female artist, because
Yes.
that really sort of blended through.
Yes. How so? How do you see that as
I don't know, but I just when you first put it onto the screen, before I even got into any of the detail, I think it was just kind of like the strongest conviction. It just felt like a female artist.
Yeah. There's oh, sorry, does anyone want to speak?
Well, I was just going to say, is that the technique that you used? Is it like an automatic drawing where you just sort of blank out your mind and let the medium and your limbs do the work for you?
That's exactly what I was going to mention. I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't know the actual formal analysis of the work, but I did my own. And right as soon as I saw the title of the work, I thought automatism, right? Automatism as this surrealist method of art making where it's just a random movement on, on paper or on canvas, and you let your hand represent your subconscious mind. So this is all before your rational mind kicks in and tries to control the situation. And I think it was William that brought this up earlier, right? In art historical methodology, we want to right away start thinking, overthinking, think of associations and so on and so forth. And I did that as well with this work. But then I thought, okay, automatism, how can these random per se are these line works, how can they just guide me into the work? And I started getting frustrated. I started getting really frustrated because I didn't know what I was looking at. And I think that's very much goes hand in hand with automatism. So yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. The title is Automatic. So we could speculate and say that it is a direct reference to automatism, or perhaps it's not. But if we know the title of the work, the date of the work, that's 1948. Surrealism, of course, was already, it was already well taking hold of the art world. And so the work is created by Alexandra Luke, and I do believe that she may have been influenced by automatism. And just to briefly mention, Alexandra Luke, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but she was a Canadian artist, woman artist, born in Montreal. She was one of the 2 founding members of the Ontario-based group of abstract artists known as the Painters 11. And if you've ever had a chance to visit the Art Gallery of Hamilton, there's a wonderful section, I hope that it's still on display, of a lot of the paintings done by the Painters 11. And I'm sure there are other galleries in Ontario that have their work in the collection. But Alexandra Luke is one of the 2 women, as you see in this image, who founded this group. And at first, Alexandra Luke, she started making art in her late 20s. And at first, she painted landscapes in the style of Painters 11. Sorry, not Painters, like Group of 7. So her work was certainly influenced by nature, by the earthly elements. And somebody mentioned, I'm sorry, I forgot who, there's leaves, right? There's the motif of leaves, perhaps. Maybe even the blue represents water and fluidity, and, the earth, the browns, the blacks, the greens. Definitely see that in the work. It's like a very natural abstraction. So Luke started creating art in her late 20s. And then somebody, I believe, actually critiqued her work. Somebody within the art world, I don't know their name, please forgive me, but they mentioned, maybe you should start exploring abstraction, because Luke ended up seeing a show in the 1930s, an abstract show in Toronto, and was very much inspired by abstraction, gravitated towards it, and so started creating more abstract works. And this mixed media on paper that you just saw, I'm going to just take 2 slides back to see it again, is one of these examples. Her work, Luke's work, is actually most often than not more vibrant and more formalist in its nature. But this work, I just gravitated towards it because it was just so dainty to me, and it was so earthly, and then eventually made me feel frustrated, and it kind of challenged me. And so I wanted to explore it further, and that's why I chose it for this Slow Art Day. And I hope that you can share with me how you feel about it. Maybe it frustrates you as well, or maybe it makes you feel calm, or makes you more curious about why Luke chose this medium, and why Luke decided to turn towards abstraction rather than paint landscapes. Please let me know if you have any thoughts. I feel like I talk too much.
It's funny, people have mentioned these more earthly elements, and that wasn't my impression at all. I do see the topographical interpretation and maybe drawing to more
Yes.
early, expressions. But I see this as a figurative piece for some reason, and it just looks really playful to me. But yeah, I don't know what to think of it. And it actually, I do kind of feel like a sense of frustration with it too, for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's just some of these more regular lines, and I don't know. It's interesting.
You mentioned playfulness. I think there's definitely playfulness in this work, and it's whimsical, right? It's quite whimsical, and it's that color choice, perhaps. And yes, the aerial perspective that was mentioned earlier is definitely there. That topographical viewpoint that was also seen in Tommaso's work, right? And maybe that goes back to this idea that artists can often have this critical distance when they're creating art, right? And Luke perhaps also had this aerial perspective, maybe flying above the work and viewing it from this level. It's playful, yeah, definitely.
A little piece, almost like you're flying over the Nazca lines or something too, right? The way they
Yes.
pop out. And there was a piece of me, I think, as I was looking at it, that I was trying to figure out in my mind which came first, if it was, the colors and then creating some boundaries and lines around, or if the colors were filled in after some of the contours were in place, and yeah, getting inside the artist's head a little.
I had that same question. I was wondering, did that water stain like technique, was that the first step, and then Luke decided to outline the work, or was it the other way around, or maybe it kind of happened simultaneously? Yeah, I definitely had that question. I was trying to get into her head as well.
I'm wondering if the sense of tension that I personally am experiencing is like I've tried that technique of just doing an automatic drawing, automatism, and there is a lot of having the mind try to take over and then pulling back. So it's like trying to make sense of something and draw something cohesively, and then no, just let that go. Right. And I wonder if that's kind of what I'm experiencing in this work.
Yes, I think I am too. And maybe that's where that frustration comes in, right? Our rational brain just wants to go in and ask these questions and try to answer them at the same time. And then that sense of frustration, what am I looking at? Why is it like this? Why am I feeling this way? And I really love that. I appreciate that art can do that, right? It brings it all to the surface. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Olga, I was also just going to say, overall with this whole experience, I know that the context and artist statements have been very different, or kind of the intent or interpretation, but I found it very calming with all three, including even with the first image. But I wonder if that's as much the process of just spending the amount of time, right? So not trying to hurry through with a reaction or an interpretation and moving on in the gallery to something else. And you've done a really good job of facilitating this so that I don't think anybody felt on the spot to have to contribute anything. And it's a very safe, like non-judgmental way, because I'm not at all an art expert, but I think just the process really speaks to how this has been relaxing and calming.
I'm so glad. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really hope that you felt safe in sharing your experiences and your feelings. And yes, some of the themes are certainly much more heavy, but I hope that with time you have your own, mental ability, your own strength of trying to level yourself out and just feel calm as you experience the art.
Thank you very much, Olga. I really appreciated this time, and everyone.
Absolutely.
And I really appreciate everyone for sharing their thoughts and helping to look at the art in an even deeper way. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're pretty much almost done. I believe I wanted to share one statement actually by Alexandra Luke. Here she is again. And here's the group of, I keep messing up and saying group of 7 and Painters 11, but this is the Painters 11, the abstract group that was formed in Toronto. Here, of course, we have just a few examples. I don't think we'll spend too much time on it, but this is the automatism that I was talking about. And I don't know if there's a direct link to the automatic title that Luke has, but that's what I kind of sensed when I saw her work. And so I included these 3 images just as examples of other works that are known as automatic drawings. And here, so this is the final image that I just wanted to share, because when I chose this work, this final 3rd piece by Luke, automatic instantly reminded me of Helen Frankenthaler, who was an incredible artist, American woman artist. And this painting here, Mountains and Sea, once again, a very natural work, very earthly, was created in 1952. So right around, within a few years' time, when automatic was created in 1948, this was 1952. This became very iconic because of its technique, and the technique that Frankenthaler became so well known for is called the soak stain technique. So what Frankenthaler did is she thinned out her paint with turpentine or kerosene, possibly, and developed a medium that was entirely her own, where the paint seeped into and through the weave of the unprimed canvas. And you can see on the right side here, I hope that you're able to see it, because from the way I look at it, I have the icons of the video here. I hope you can see it. Frankenthaler, the artist herself, she's sitting pretty much on top of the unprimed canvas, and staining the canvas, and the paint is thin, it's going right through, and it's kind of, there's a sense of letting go of control, and the paint is then in control, and it goes deeply into the canvas and stains it. And Frankenthaler was very much known for this. And from my experience as an art history grad, there's been a lot of discussion about how this is such a important work for feminist art theory, because that stainage, that the color technique does represent something that's very feminine in a sense. And I think we discussed this earlier, how Luke's mixed media work, apparently it may appear like it's made by a woman. And so once I saw this, believe it or not, right when I saw this automatic drawing, per se, mixed media work, I thought of Frankenthaler, and that was just from previously being familiar with this work, Mountains and Sea, from 1952. And so, yeah, I just wanted to leave you with, I guess there's quite a lot that we discussed today. Just the last little thing that I wanted to share, and I think it speaks about art, but not only about art, it can relate to life. And that's Luke's statement on painting. Alexandra Luke said, "Painting is like life itself. You learn as you go along, what to select, what to leave out. This is very important. What goes with what, how to get interest and excitement with unity and balance, how to take the bad days with the good days. And at last, but not least, how to enjoy and learn at the same time." And I know that this statement was about painting and life, but I hope we can take that with us for the rest of the weekend and, share what we have learned and how we felt with each other. And I hope you enjoyed today. If you have any other questions about any of the works here, this turtle just reminds me of the symbol of Slow Art Day, right? We moved at the pace of turtles, and I hope we enjoyed ourselves today. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email me at kolotylo@mcmaster.ca. I am once again Olga Kolotylo. I am the information officer at McMaster Museum of Art. Whenever you get a chance, please feel free to visit us. We are located right in the heart of McMaster University, right in the center of the campus. Today, in the background, my colleague Teresa joined me and did like all the technical magic in the back and has shared with you a bunch of links that I hope you find helpful. If you ever find yourselves on campus, please feel free to either explore our public art, which you see here. This is Mary Ann Barkhouse bronze sculptures of an encounter between two coyotes. That's quite intriguing. And of course, just, come through the doors and enjoy all the arts that we have that's currently on view. And then we have a wonderful collection of work that I myself, since I am new to the museum as well, and I mentioned that earlier, I still have yet to see a lot of this work in person. And, in maybe next year, we can all meet together and actually see some of the work in person, right? Because that's also a very special experience. But I hope today was, I hope it was insightful in a way, and just I hope you got to enjoy yourself. We went a little bit over time, but I'm really glad that you stayed and got to experience what we kind of organized and created for you today and prepared. Yeah, if you have any other questions, please email me. If you wanted to check our website, there's a lot of information about upcoming events, and any of our past events are also included. And as I mentioned, there is a digital collection of all the art that we have in our permanent collection. And so if you wanted to see, for example, different perspectives of the Guan Yin, the second artwork that we looked at, the porcelain, there are more images on the website. All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Olga, for great facilitation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.